So I was up drawing this pretty much all of yesterday, brothers and sisters. I hope you like. This is my version of Colossus or Colossal Titan. If you like, remember to certainly follow me on all the social things.
Attack on Titan, Episode 1. To you, 2,000 years in the future.
Welcome, my brothers and sisters of the Nerd Nation. I, as always, am Jim, here to bring you a review on Shingeki no Kyojin, also known as Attack on Titan. This is actually for the animated series, for the anime. I have also been reading and doing reviews on the manga as well, and I will pick up on those as time permits. But honestly, the anime is just so well done that I had to dive into it, start watching it, and then of course start putting up my 2 cents about it. So, without further ado, let's dive right in, shall we? Now, it's really nice because in the anime, you almost immediately understand how things work as far as this world, the people that inhabit it. Basically, what has happened is humanity has pretty much all but been wiped out by these enormous humanoid-looking creatures called Titans. All we know is that they appeared about 100 years ago, and pretty much, they eat people, and they have pushed society and humanity to the brink of extinction. We were able to, humanity was able to retreat within these huge walled cities. I will actually go, and I found a good picture to put up, so I will flash that up real quick, and then we can go from there.
Hopefully this illustration helps you to better understand the walls and the city.
So that should give you an idea of how it is, the wall inside the wall inside the wall, and then these kind of little pockets almost too that are by themselves. And so I don't know how many people are alive. They don't really say. It looks pretty sizable, so I'm thinking it's a decent sized city, maybe 1 million people, maybe 500,000. I don't really know. Maybe as the show progresses, they will tell us exactly. However, these Titans, these humanoid-looking, they basically look just kind of like these weird sort of, almost like dolls. They're like faces. They have these big, like, double, triple rows of teeth where there's more teeth in their mouth than there should be. And they just look pretty grotesque looking. But in one of the first scenes that we see a number of what we find out is the Survey Corps division, which is I guess like the military of this, and they are out in the woods, and they have seen a Titan, and they have these belt-driven, almost like thruster packs that have these 2 thrusters on either side of them, and they not only hold extra blades for their swords, but they also go and they fire out these like harpoons into trees and structures and things like that, and they fire them out and are able to pretty much propel and use the momentum from when they reel these things in, almost like a Spider-Man or something like that would, and they can pretty much run on air. They learn how to use these things, and basically by using, shooting one over there and one over there will make it so when you start to reel them in, it'll fire you over there. So it's really pretty cool to see it in 3D in action. There's a scene at the beginning where they're going to surround a Titan. They're going to use these 3D maneuvers, they call it, and obviously surround him, overwhelm him. And these Titans, we find out too, and I can't remember if it's in the manga or if it's in the anime, but generally these things run between 5 and 15 meters tall, and for those of you that don't feel like doing the math conversion, it's about 17, 18 feet tall on the small end, all the way to about 50 feet on the large end. So the walls that surround this city, this last civilization, this last city of mankind, are like 150 feet, 160 feet tall. They're about 50 meters tall. So no Titan is tall enough, and they have not been breached in 100 years. Now, for the most part, though, the majority of civilization lives behind these walls, never going anywhere, never knowing anything about the outside world and what's happened. Most, if not all, people that are alive now have never seen anything but the inside of these walls. So very shortly after that, we are introduced to to one of our main characters, and his name is Eren. And Eren is a young boy. Kind of hard to tell because even though the animation is very, very good on this, it's kind of hard to tell because whenever you get into the Japanese style of animation, a lot of their characters look much younger than they actually are. But I would assume maybe a teenage boy. So he's having this dream about these Titans and just sort of flashes in this dream. It's sort of a nightmare. And he wakes up, and he's shooken. He's actually tearing up, and one of the other main characters that we wind up being introduced to, Mikasa Ackerman, a good friend of his, and kind of like an adopted, I guess, stepsister or something along those lines. It looks as if they live together, which we find out very quickly. But he wakes up, and she's like, why were you crying? And he's like, I don't know. And she says, well, you should have your dad check you out, And he says, no, are you crazy? And so we don't really know a whole lot. It starts unfolding. You get little pieces of the puzzle at a time. There's then a brief interaction, too, between Mikasa and Eren. They walk upon the wall guard. And basically the wall guard is a bunch of guys that are sitting around drinking and eating and just kind of being freeloaders. And this Mr. Hannes seems to know Mikasa and Eren, and certainly knows Eren's family. We find out very quickly, and he kind of comes up and, hey, what are you doing? And he's talking to him, and Eren starts giving him shit like, hey, listen, why are you guys drinking on the job? And you got to be prepared in case something happens. And he's like, happens? What's going to happen? There's not, walls haven't been breached in 100 years. And to tell you the truth, it's good if we're sitting around freeloading and eating and drinking, because that means that it's peaceful times, right? So we'd rather have that happen. And to tell you the truth, if some shit happened, because Eren says, so if something happened, you guys aren't prepared. And he says, no. So then Eren gets pretty pissed off, and he says, what you should be the wall repair guard, because they talk about how they can see these Titans out roaming, kind of in the distance when they're up repairing parts of the wall. So I imagine that these things randomly try to attack the walls, not to mention the walls are, stone, and that's going to erode over time, especially if they've been up for 100 years. So we kind of see that brief exchange, and again, nothing real profound as of yet, just kind of building a little bit of the characters. And then Eren goes to winds up going to his house, and he's going to sit down for dinner. And prior to him doing that, though, there's a quick exchange where he goes. Some of the Survey Corps, we assume that were in that first scene, come back, and they're all bloodied and just real downtrodden. One of the guys has got a bandage over his face and his blood coming from where his eye socket is and everything else. And everybody, is kind of coming up to greet them. These are the heroes returning. So we find out that the Survey Corps is basically, they're sent out to find more about these Titans, maybe to find their weaknesses, to study them, to learn how we can beat them. Because at this point, we don't even know where they've come from. Do they come from the ground? Do they come from another planet? Were they here the whole time, but just across an ocean and we didn't know? There's really not much information given at the time. So, and it's really kind of cool because it is a mystery, But so the Survey Corps comes back. They're bloodied. They're beaten. There's a woman who comes up asking about her son. The leader of the Survey Corps basically says, hey, hand me this, and they hand it to her, this bloody blood-soaked rag. She opens it. It's his arm. It's just really a real grisly scene, so you assume that obviously they did not do well in their fight against the Titan or Titans. And really, Eren's kind of pissed off because later on he goes and walks away from that scene, and he hears some other people just talking about how, more or less like they're useless. The Survey Corps is useless, and that's what their taxes go to and everything. And Eren goes and smacks one of the guys and goes to attack him, Mikasa winds up grabbing him and yanking him down the street against his will the whole time. They had gone out to collect some firewood, and she kind of whips him up against the wall and basically says, you gotta calm the fuck down, right? And we find out that Eren, his dream is to go outside the walls, and that he wants to join the Survey Corps when he's old enough. So, at any rate, then we get back to the whole exchange where he goes, to his house, and he sits down at dinner, and Mikasa, his friend, announces that Eren wants to join the Survey Corps, and his mother's like, what the hell? Absolutely not! Are you crazy? And his father, we find out, and we also find out too from Mr. Hannes earlier, that he is some sort of involved, some sort of scientist or something like that, because Mr. Hannes says that he owes everyone owes Eren's father their lives, basically. So he saved them from some kind of plague or something earlier. So and the father, is kind of this thinner, he's got the little shit mustache and the wire rim glasses. And he basically is just real calm about it, because the mother's telling him, hey, you got to tell him this and that, and he's like, listen, the boat's here, I got to get going, we'll talk when we get back, Eren. And he goes and shows him some kind of key, and he says, and I think this is going to be important, but he shows him this key, and he says, When I get back, we'll go and I'll show you what I've been hiding in the basement all these years, you know. And Eren's like, okay, you know. Then he also goes and says to the wife, he's like, listen, Carla, there's nothing wrong with, you know, somebody wanting to know more than this and wanting to see the outside world and everything else. So certainly has a good point. I mean, if you grew up behind walls or in a cage, so to speak, you know, you'd want to see what the outside world is. Even if the government kind of condemns all thinking of the outside world and everything else, they're trying to keep people within the walls, you know, and keep them alive, keep humanity going. But really, that's no way to live, because they say, you know, aren't we just like sheep then? Aren't we like cattle being herded? So the next scene winds up taking us, and we're introduced to the third of the kind of trio of main characters, and he's a little blonde fellow by the name of Armin. And Armin's getting his shit handed to him by a few bullies, and he pretty much, you can tell he's the smart one, because the bully's asking him, oh, you know, what did you say? And he kind of basically like outwits him, you know, and the bully's just kind of like, what the... You know, and he winds up, it's just really cool how he winds up doing a play on words to go and basically make the bully look like an idiot. Well, then all of a sudden Eren comes running around the corner, you know, and like I said, the animation, this is real good, you know, so Eren comes chucking down the street, you know, and all the bullies turn, and they're like all getting ready because they're gonna fight him. They're like, oh, it's Eren. Well, then around the corner comes Mikasa, you know, cruising around the corner, the girl, right? And apparently everybody's scared of Mikasa. She must be one bad little bitch, because she comes flying around the corner, and they start running, you know, and Eren gets up to Armin, and he's like, oh yeah, they saw me and they ran. And Armin's like, no, actually they saw Mikasa and they ran, you know. So he asks him what's going on, and, you know, Armin basically tells him, you know, hey, I told him that I want to, you know, that, you know, you're small-minded if you don't want to think and see the world and go outside and see things, you know, and that's what we should be striving to do. So Armin also goes and makes mention of something about, you know, these, just because the walls haven't been breached in 100 years doesn't mean they couldn't be breached any day. And one of the things that I said in my first ever review that I did, which was on the Volume 1 of Attack on Titan, the manga, is that whenever you're introduced to in a movie, a comic, whatever it may be, right, something that is impenetrable or unbreachable, that means that shit's about to get breached, okay? If they introduce you to somebody who's never been beat, guaranteed by the end of that episode or that chapter, he's going to be beat. You know, it's just how it works. So as Armin says this, all of a sudden, you know, kind of like the air goes still, you know, and everything like that, and all of a sudden, outside of the walls, we just see like this huge crackle of lightning and thunder, right? And you're like, what the hell, you know? And all of a sudden, you know, it winds up appearing, and you can see, and it's a really kind of a cool scene the way it's done. You can see this Titan. Now, remember, 150, 160 foot tall is the wall, and you can see this Titan's head looming over the wall, right? So this thing's got to be all of a couple 100 feet tall. You know, this is like the Godzilla of Titans, you know, big as a, you know, tall as a building, and easily 3 or 4 times the size of the biggest one that we've been introduced to or know about so far. So this Titan goes and, you know, basically just goes and, you know, puts his hand up on the wall and then just fucking kicks a hole into the wall, and shit flies everywhere, man. You see, because he ripped off a piece of the wall and tossed it too, and there's just, you can just see from, like, the way everything is, you know, on this hill going down, just, you know. And as I said, I mean, just top-notch animation. That's really one of the things that drew me to this, too, is that it wasn't done sloppy at all. You know, if you want to see something that's, you know, that's really nice, high definition, just wonderfully illustrated and animated, this is the thing for you. So, so anyway, everything goes to hell, you know, and now there's, you know, Titans are starting to breach through the walls and everything. Eren goes and starts running around the corner because he's thinking, oh my God, you know, and he's, that area that got busted in, that's where his house is. So he's running around the corner and he's like, oh God, when I come around the corner, my house is still going to be there, right? Well, he gets around the corner, and sure as shit, his house is there, but it's flattened, right? And he's running, Mom, you know? And Mikasa's with him. And the mother has been, she's like half sticking out of the house, but basically the whole roof and house is collapsed on top of her. She's pinned underneath it. Long story short, there's this real, you know, heartfelt exchange of like, we got to get her out of there. And him and Mikasa are trying to. As this is all happening, there's a Titan that's approaching in the distance, you know. And I don't know if they can just smell humans like dogs, you know, can for food or something, but it's drawn towards them. And the mother's like, listen, you just got to leave me. And he's like, no, I'm not leaving you. Are you kidding? And she's just like, just listen to me for once, you know. Even if you're able to pull me out of here, the house, you know, house falling on me, crush my legs. I can't run. And like I said, he's half her size, you know. I mean, it looks like that anyway. And he's like, well, I'll just carry you. And she's like, well, you just listen to me. So they won't budge. They're trying to help her, but nothing's happening with that. The Titan's getting closer. All of a sudden come flying in like Spider-Man is Mr. Hannes. And he comes in and he's like, okay, and she goes, get the kids out of here, get the kids out of here. That's what Carla, Eren's mother says. And he says, oh, don't underestimate me, and he pulls out his sword from his thing and he's starting to charge. He's like, I will kill the Titan and save you all. And she's like, you fool, no, just get the kids. So as he's running towards the Titan, he goes, and you can see how, even though you were trained for this and everything else, there's been no battles, nobody breaching the wall in 100 years. So he's probably never seen any action, just simulated stuff, right? Because he goes and chickens out, and he just goes and bitches out, basically. And he's just like, no, and he just stops right dead where he's at. I mean, he sees this Titan. I mean, these things, like I said, they're pretty grisly looking. Their hair's all kind of mussed up, and they just got this weird sort of dead look in their eyes, like some kind of like the Child's Play Chucky doll. I don't know if anybody's ever seen those movies back from the 80s and 90s, those B horror movies. Just real creepy looking, and especially with the extra teeth in the mouth and all that. So this thing is coming towards him. Mr. Hannes goes and turns around, and he grabs Eren and Mikasa under each arm and just starts running. And it's really kind of a heartfelt scene, too, because as he's running and looking back and they're looking back, it all kind of happens in slow motion and from real cool angles. But the Titan eventually makes its way over to the crushed house, goes and just, and picks up Eren's mom, in one hand over here, and then, because she's still moving and wiggling and everything, it looks like he goes and just kind of snaps her in half or breaks her neck or whatever, because then she's just laying there limp, and you can see an Eren and Mikasa, no, and they're crying and they're looking back as he's running with them away, and the Titan just slowly goes and puts her in his mouth. And I mean, it's grisly, That's how the episode ends, man. I mean, there's just blood flying everywhere, and all of a sudden the credits start rolling. So everything has gone to hell. We don't know a whole lot about what's going on with Eren's father, or Eren himself. We're just kind of introduced initially to some of these characters. But really, this is one of the hottest things going right now. I mean, everybody's talking about it here in Japan. It really seems to be really cool. And I think one of the things, too, that's easy for people to be brought on board with it is the manga is a monthly series instead of a weekly series. And it's not on like chapter 200 or 300 or 500 where it's more difficult for entry-level readers to get in and really know what's going on. I think that is overwhelming to some people, and I'm not saying that I don't like it, because I'm the guy that's reviewing every chapter of One Piece from chapter 1, So certainly if you haven't seen any of those, after you're done with this, go over ahead and check them out. But I know to a lot of people that's daunting. Once you see something, you're like, there's 200 or 300. I used to be the same way with comic books. Some of the comics like Spider-Man and the long-running ones with Batman, Superman. Who wants to start on issue 573? You don't know what plot points you've missed. You don't kind of know what the history is between this character and this character. And it takes you like 10 or 20 issues just to kind of get caught up to speed to where the current storyline is going. And then again, you still never really know what's happened in some of those back ones. And it's really difficult to kind of fill in on it. So like I said, I think this is kind of neat, because in the manga, I think it's only on, maybe 48 or 49 right now, and it's a monthly series. So it's really easy to get caught up to it. And then there's, I believe they're on at episode 21 or 22 maybe now for the anime. And from what I've heard, it's slated to be 25 episodes, and then that's it. It's going to stop, probably for several years until the manga can get ahead again far enough to where they can produce maybe another 20 or 25 episodes. But all in all, I mean, in my mind, and I never really assign numbers or stars or anything like that, but I mean, this is top notch. This is a 10 out of 10. It's a must see. If you haven't seen it, go ahead and take a look at it. I just signed up, and I paid for like a membership for $6 or $7 a month to Crunchyroll, and that's where I've been watching it. So very, very cool stuff, But at any rate, though, that's my whole take on it. Make sure that you leave your comments and your thoughts down below. Feel free to hit the thumbs up, the like button, if you think that I deserve it. And then, of course, subscribe if you haven't done so already. We'll look forward to catching you in the next one, Nation.
As always, thanks for watching, brothers and sisters, and remember, join the Nerd Nation. It's the right thing to do. Trust me. Tell them Jim sent you.